Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at a really fascinating paper. It's titled Myths of Motherhood, The Role of Culture in the Development of Postpartum Depression. So we've got this one core source guiding us here, and our mission really is to unpack how these, long-held cultural expectations around being a mother might clash, sometimes quite powerfully, with the actual reality of it and how that could potentially, contribute to mental health challenges.
Yeah, it's definitely a deep dive into all that historical baggage, you could say, and the societal pressures on women. The paper really lays out how deeply ingrained ideas, often shaped, as the source puts it, by a masculine perspective, over like centuries can impact a woman's personal experience of motherhood today.
Okay.
Get ready for some pretty eye-opening stuff from this material.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit.
Yeah.
The paper kicks off by highlighting this core tension, right, between how motherhood has been defined culturally, traditionally, and then how it's actually experienced. Historically, the source is telling us the main view has been surprisingly, external, almost impersonal.
Exactly. Yeah, the paper points to this view, seeing motherhood largely as like a social function, almost a stage a woman had to go through to reach what was seen as full femininity.
Right.
Think way back, ancient ideas. Aristotle seeing women as just receptacles, or medieval times treating women almost like property for having kids. Even early psychoanalysis, while looking into it, sometimes framed it as women compensating for some kind of perceived lack.
And it's fascinating how the source points out that this traditional discourse, often defined by men, has just overwhelmingly pushed the positive, almost divine aspects.
Yeah.
They even look at the language used, and the adjectives tied to motherhood are things like good, divine, great, radiant, positive. It builds this cultural script that just doesn't leave much space for, difficulty or messiness.
Right. And that's where the paper brings in this idea of the female experience perspective, which it argues is, much more recent. This is where you see scholars and women themselves starting to push back against that script, voicing the idea that motherhood isn't just some natural, automatically happy event, but actually a critical, complex, and conflicting situation.
The source even frames it as a developmental crisis, like it needs a whole reorganization of a woman's identity. Suddenly you're dealing with new vulnerabilities, new insecurities.
Yeah.
It's like the birth of a mother happening right alongside the birth of the child.
And this view actively challenges that really deep-seated cultural bias that says motherhood is the only path to fulfillment, or that you have to fit the mold of the perfectly happy, always fulfilled mother.
Which just isn't always the reality.
Not at all. The reality, as the paper notes, is this complex mix, psychological, relational, social factors all playing in. Not every woman reacts with what the paper kind of wryly calls prompt readiness.
So here's where it gets really interesting. For me, the source shows how women are actively right now challenging and sort of breaking down these myths. The paper calls it demythization. And they give these great examples, like looking at online blogs or the work of a French comedian.
Yes, those blogs, like non-solo mama, meaning not just mothers, they give voice to these hidden realities. You see posts revealing secret doubts, the shock, how hard the routine is, the isolation.
Yeah.
People admitting it can even be, boring.
Wow.
There's one quote, a blogger saying, "The most frustrating period of my life has been maternity leave. Only sleepless nights, poops, and baby food as discussion topics."
Yeah, I saw that quote in the source too about maternity leave being worse than commuting. That really lands. And then the comedian, Florence Foresti, she uses humor to just flat out debunk the myths, calling herself a motherfucker, joking about pregnancy being like a 9-month hangover. She directly attacks that old idea that you're either woman or mother, and points out how baby blues is often just a way to dismiss what might actually be clinical depression. It's women building their own narrative, using their code, not the old external one.
And this all leads to a really crucial question the paper gets into. How does this collision, this clash between the cultural myth and the actual lived reality, specifically impact mental health?
Okay.
The source puts forward this hypothesis that for certain women, especially those with a particular personality structure, they call it typus melancholicus, or TM, this cultural pressure is particularly damaging.
Right, the typus melancholicus. So the source describes this type as someone who tends to be, quite rigid about following social norms. Orderly, conscientious, really needs to avoid guilt, and focuses maybe too much on external expectations.
Exactly. Something the source calls heteronomia or hypernomia. They feel this strong pull to embody that preset, impersonal ideal of motherhood.
So for these women trying to perfectly live up to the myth, seeing motherhood as this apotheosis of femininity, a role they feel they absolutely must perform flawlessly according to tradition.
Yeah, it forces them to suppress all the real contradictions, the difficulties, the messy parts of their actual experience. The paper argues this internal conflict just becomes incredibly tough, maybe even unmanageable for them.
Like those quotes in the source. Women saying things like, motherhood should be the most fulfilling state. Why isn't it for me? Or that heartbreaking one, it's terrible to realize I can't be the kind of mother I always dreamed of being, and I can't be anything else. They're reaching for an external ideal that just doesn't fit their internal world, and for someone with that TM personality structure, that clash can be, well, devastating. It makes them more vulnerable to depression, according to the source. So, okay, we've seen how this pressure to conform to these idealized, almost impersonal myths of motherhood built up over centuries, reinforced by culture, can create this really profound internal conflict for women. Especially for those with certain personality traits, like that rigid adherence to norms we talked about. This clash between the expected apotheosis of femininity and the actual complex, sometimes really difficult reality can lead to significant distress. And, as the source highlights, vulnerability to depression.
It's such a powerful reminder, isn't it, that what gets presented often as this totally natural, inherently fulfilling role is actually deeply tied up with cultural ideas. And ignoring the authentic, sometimes messy personal experience can have pretty serious consequences.
Absolutely. And this whole dive, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other widely accepted cultural ideals, across different parts of life, maybe career success or physical appearance, relationships, whatever, might also be setting us up for internal conflict when we slam into the unpredictable reality of our own experience? Something for you to think about.